So we're a little less than a month away from the Switch 2 launch, and I thought it might be fun to reflect on some of my most played games on Switch 1, maybe give a few recommendations in here, I guess, though to be honest, a lot of these are pretty popular titles. Chances are, if you're a big Nintendo fan like myself, you've already played most of these, but who knows, maybe there'll be at least one or two games that you haven't thought about giving a try yet. So for starters, my most played game, by like a country mile, is Super Smash Bros. Ultimate with over 1,000 hours of gameplay in it, which definitely reeks of the unemployed COVID era for me. But I also just really adored this game. It's the first and probably last Smash Bros. Game that I played competitively to some degree. I went to a couple locals, took second at 2 of them, and washed out in pools in another one, so not exactly a storied career by any means, but I was very invested in this game. Honestly, before it even released. Smash Bros. Is always my most anticipated game for every Nintendo console, dating back to Brawl, which I was really tuned into the hype cycle for as well, checking the Smash Bros. Dojo every day, hoping that various characters got in. And as far as that goes, Ultimate ended up fulfilling a lot of my longest wishes for characters, the big one being King K. Rool. I don't think I'll ever forget the reveal trailer. That was a huge moment, like a decade in waiting for me. Simon Belmont was another big one, and bringing back all the characters from the previous games as well was huge. The game wasn't perfect by any means. I mean, as far as gameplay goes, I think all that stuff is fine. I'm not like a Melee purist or whatever. I don't have one specific idea of how Smash Bros. Needs to be. But there were elements like the lack of trophies and the single player being kind of thin that kind of keep it from being that ultimate Smash Bros. Game that I wish it was. But there was a lot of other good stuff too, like the single player for Classic Mode, I think it's like the best Classic Mode we've ever gotten. And as far as like the basic gameplay goes, there's a lot of variety, and just based on the sheer number of characters, right? And so I ended up putting a ton of hours into this, got a handful into the Elite Smash, and I still return to it every now and then. They were adding new spirits into the game up to like close to the end of last year, I want to say, when they added in the Mario Wonder spirits. So I think the game is officially put to rest now, but they kept the content rolling out for a while there. There was always a reason to come back. And I just really appreciate what they did with this title. And I'm hoping Switch 2 we get a deluxe version of it or something that maybe can staple on like an adventure mode, Melee style adventure mode, or some more spirits. I don't know, just something to really sink my teeth into again. My second most played game is Balatro at 485 hours. And the thing about Balatro is that I've bought this game 3 times. I've played it extensively on PC, largely for the modding scene that is available on there. I have it on my phone, on mobile, and I have it on Switch, which I kind of consider my primary account. But if you total all the hours across the different platforms together, it probably rivals Smash Bros. Very easily. If you haven't played Balatro yet, it is an extremely addictive poker roguelike deck builder, and I think it was really this game and another one I'll be talking about in just a little bit that kind of sold me on the roguelike deck builder as a favorite genre of mine. And it's not something I thought I'd really be all that into. It's just like a perfect example of taking an incredibly simple concept of poker and stapling all of these mechanics on top of it that make it so rich and deep and replayable. I'm still playing this to this day, going for Completionist ++. If you know, you know. It's quite the undertaking. I think what I really appreciate about it is just how easy to understand and straightforward all the rules and modifiers are. And yet, there's so much potential to make these really broken builds that are satisfying to pull off and get these crazy high scores. Considering the game has gotten no major gameplay content updates, they've done some DLC graphics packs, I guess you might say, but no major gameplay DLC. I think it's astounding how much time I've put into this one, and if you haven't heard of it, you haven't played it, this is a huge recommendation for me, one of my favorite games of all time, easily. Alright, next up, we have Mario Odyssey. Across my various accounts, I have about 250 hours into this one. I'd say about half of that is probably from going for full 100%, maxing out the balloon world mode, collecting 999 moons, getting all the moons from every level, getting every achievement, so on and so forth. And then the other half is because I got fairly invested in speedrunning this game. And it really rivals Mario 64 as my favorite game to speedrun, as a sort of a casual, as a pretender to the profession, you might say. I mean, 3D Mario is just impossible to beat, right? They're some of the most consistently great games ever, and Odyssey really amped things up with these additional layers of movement that they added to Mario with a cappy, being able to throw the cap, bounce off of it, into a dive, into, a twirl, or, it kind of brought this idea of the expressive platformer to the forefront. And all the capture mechanic stuff is a lot of fun too. It was just really great to see Nintendo go back to this style of Mario game after Galaxy made things more linear, and then 3D World made things even more linear than that. It felt like for a time, the more open 3D Mario games that I really cherished, like 64 and Sunshine, were just gone. And Odyssey said, nope, we're bringing those back, and it's arguably the best it's ever been done. I think this game has become more controversial over the years as, like, people who don't really know how to have fun but do know how to think about having fun kind of analyze it. And they say, oh, it's too easy to get the moons. It doesn't have that same satisfying structure that Sunshine or 64 had with its missions. And if you analyze the elements like divorced from how they feel together in the game while you're playing it, then that's understandable. But the game is just so overflowing with creativity and the ability for the player to express themselves with the moveset in these environments that stuff really kind of falls away from me. And it never gets boring. I feel like a lot of lesser games, they kind of top out at a certain point where it feels like, okay, I've explored all there is in terms of the mechanics of this game, and I have 250 hours or whatever in Mario Odyssey, right? And I still feel like it goes deeper. I know it goes deeper. I've seen like the real high-level speedruns of this. You can take this game to crazy degrees that maybe don't match Mario 64, but that game's also, as much as I love it, kind of broken, right? Which is where some of that game's more advanced mechanics stem from. So yeah, it's a beautiful game. It's got a great soundtrack. The gameplay is top-notch. It's just killer. I love Mario Odyssey. Next up, and this kind of surprised me, to be honest, when I saw that this was my next most played game, is Mario Maker 2. I didn't remember playing this one as much as I did, but it does make a lot of sense, because if you invest any time into making a level and you care even a little bit about its quality, you can spend hours revising and tweaking and playtesting, of course, to make sure it's just right. There was also a story mode in this one, which was very nice. I'm very glad they included that. I do really like 2D Mario. I know I kind of complained a little bit ago about how 3D Mario had gone so linear forever or whatever. I don't have anything against those games, really, to be honest. I do like the linear 3D Marios, and I like 2D Mario. They're just kind of different things, and I like having both the open games and the linear ones. So a bunch of, new Nintendo-made 2D Mario levels, I'm all about that. And then when you do find the user-made levels that are really good, that's just a great time. And, potentially, there is an infinite number of great Mario courses that you could play on Mario Maker 2. It's just a shame that there's so much garbage that you have to sort of sift through to get there. I think Nintendo sort of remedied things a little bit towards the end of this game's life, where they added like the feature where you can play levels designed by a particular creator. Usually that implied a slightly higher level of dedication to the craft, and so that kind of was one avenue where you could find some of the better courses. But largely you're going to be in Course World looking at the new courses that have come out, or looking at the top ones, and you're going to find enemy spam crap, levels that are just like 3 seconds long, auto run levels, all the same stuff that was in Mario Maker 1 that kind of killed that game. It's back in Mario Maker 2, and I'm sure it'll be around in Mario Maker 3 whenever that gets made, which, given the Switch 2's mouse controls, come on. Mario Maker 3 is almost a given, right? I hope that they're able to figure out some way to make the whole experience just a little bit more friendly to the player and not just the creators. I don't know if there's some way that they can incentivize people to make better levels or filter out the crappier ones somehow. I don't know, but that would be the main thing I think they should address in Mario Maker 3. And lastly, we have another roguelike with Dicey Dungeons. I'm going to guess that this is the game you're the least likely to have heard of before, so let me give my full-throated recommendation for Dicey Dungeons. This was made by the same person who made VVVVV, one of my other favorite indie games. That's the gravity switching kind of 8-bit game that I'm sure you've heard the soundtrack of or seen gameplay of at some point in the past. It's like hugely famous at this point. Dicey Dungeons comes from the same creator, and it's like an RPG roguelike with very light gambling / game show theming. I don't know what it is about like the connection between gambling and roguelikes that apparently draws me in so much, but this is some really good stuff. You know, it's got elements of deck building in there. I'm trying to think of a game that I could compare it to, but it kind of stands on its own. I think maybe you could compare it to Slay the Spire to some degree. I haven't played that one as much. I think the deck building stuff is much more pronounced in that game though, from what I have played. Dicey Dungeons is like this incredibly inviting intro to the whole genre. Very easy to pick up and play and understand it, but it's hard for me to kind of give my elevator pitch as to what the game is, I guess. I remember when this game first came out, and there was a little bit of hype around it because of, you know, VVVVV, and I think it kind of got written off for the art style. I remember there being like a lot of controversy about the art style for this game, which probably gets into art community stuff that I have no idea about, honestly. It kind of went over my head. But if the art style does put you off, just give it a try anyway. The game's pretty cheap, and the gameplay is just insanely satisfying. You got 6 different classes to pick from, 6 degrees of difficulty per class, and then some bonus episodes that were added in later. Achievements for meeting certain requirements that you aren't necessarily going to just get from beating the game. You might have to set out on a run with the intention of getting that specific achievement to trigger or whatever. If I have like one complaint about it, it's that at the higher difficulties, it can feel pretty RNG dependent. But I think that's something that happens in most of these roguelikes. It takes something like really incredibly special, like Balatro, to really nail that perfect level of randomness so that it still feels somewhat fair. And even then, some runs are just a wash, right? So yeah, those are my 5 most played Switch 1 games. I think there's a high probability I put some more hours into each of these, excepting maybe Mario Maker 2 on the Switch 2. Definitely Balatro, definitely Smash. I'd say if you haven't played any of these, they're definitely all worth a try. Mario Maker 2 is maybe the one that you could wait on the most, but everything else is like a must play for me. You gotta try Dicey Dungeons, Balatro. I mean, those are the indie games, so especially those I want to shout out. And I guess VVVVV as well. I've referenced it multiple times now. If you haven't played that one before, it's also pretty cheap on the eShop and definitely worthy of a look.